But I would think that success is when you have freedom over those five things. Freedom over your energy, money, time, choice, and purpose. And when you have freedom over those things, I think you are wildly successful beyond imagination. Welcome to a very special edition of The Root of All Success. I am your host, the real Jason Duncan. This is episode 300. It's hard to believe that when I started recording these episodes back in December of 2020, that I would be recording my 300th episode. I didn't really know how long this was going to go or how I didn't know what was going to happen. But here we are, 300 in, and I'm excited. Today, I'm interviewing a very special guest, a guest that I think you will know really, really well. His name is Jason Duncan. Yeah, that's right. I'm interviewing myself for this episode. It's kind of a weird thing. We're 300 episodes in. It's wild. And yes, if you're watching and thinking, is this guy really seriously interviewing himself? The answer is yes. Yes, I am. But listen, after sitting across from 299 other amazing people, some entrepreneurs, some creatives, some athletes, some influencers, I thought it's probably time to turn the mic around, and because if I'm going to keep asking everybody these questions about the roots of their success, and maybe it's time I answer the dang question myself, right? So before we dive in, yes, I fully recognize that this could probably be one of the most narcissistic things I've ever done. Two Jasons, one screen, it's overload, right? But my wife said it's kind of like I finally achieved my dream of cloning myself. But so just be grateful that I'm not interviewing myself about interviewing myself. That's going to be next season. Just kidding. So let's go ahead without any further ado. I don't even need to introduce myself because you know who I am. And let's welcome the real Jason Duncan to the show with this first question. Jason, you started out as a school teacher, and what was the moment when you realized you weren't meant to stay in the classroom? Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge as the one being interviewed in this episode that this is a little bit weird, but I thought this would be a cool way to do this, so that's why we're doing it. But to answer the question about me being in the classroom, I did think I was going to be a school teacher forever. I was teaching 8th grade American history at Schaefer Middle School in Gallatin, Tennessee. I was in my 4th year of teaching and honestly thought that I would be teaching forever. I thought that I would be an educator forever. I was teaching 8th grade American history, but I also taught some math, even though I didn't enjoy that. I was licensed to teach physical education, even though I didn't teach it. And I also had my administrator's license. And so for all accounts, I was going to be in education forever. Well, I didn't choose to leave education. I wanted to stay in it. But in the spring of 2011, my principal came to me, Mr. Hallman, and he said, hey, we need to talk. And he explained that there had been, budget cuts coming out of the Great Recession, and he was going to have to cut a couple of teachers in the building. He wasn't going to be able to leave them their contracts in place for the next school year. He was having to cut back. And I didn't have tenure, and I was the last guy hired. So I and another teacher both got our contracts cut for the next year. And that's why I made the decision to have to go do something else. I didn't choose to leave education to become an entrepreneur and eventually a podcaster like what I'm doing now, and a coach and a mastermind leader. But I would have stayed in education forever. So do you think that your background in teaching gave you an edge as an entrepreneur that other people might not have had? Absolutely. I believe that, I look at my background. I spent 13 years in pastoral ministry. I spent 4 years as a school teacher. And then I spent over a decade actively daily running a company that became very, very successful. And now I am running a mastermind for entrepreneurs, and I'm doing podcasting, and I'm writing books, I'm speaking on stages and creating content. And so the question you ask is about, did it give me an edge to being a teacher? Yeah, absolutely. The things I learned, I had a great education becoming a teacher. I've got a master's in education. Well, actually, technically, it's a master of arts in learning and teaching from Lipscomb University right here in Nashville, Tennessee. And I went through a cohort program with, I think there were 18 of us who went through that. I can't remember. It was a small number, 20, it was 20 or so of us who went through that. And we developed deep bonds, and there were some long-term teachers who were just getting their masters. There were other people coming out of the corporate world trying to get into teaching like me. And we learned from some of the greatest people in the country about how education really works, how the brain works, etc. So when I became an entrepreneur, it was natural for me to lead like a teacher, to explain things and to set things up and understand that people learn either visually, auditorily, or kinesthetically, VAK. And that's what I had to learn as a teacher. You either learn visually, you learn auditorily by what you hear, or kinesthetically by doing it. And employees are the same way, because every human is the same way. So some employees needed to see it. I'm a visual learner. Some employees needed to hear it multiple times, and some people needed to do it before they totally understood. So yeah, I believe that teaching did give me an edge. So what was the biggest mindset shift that you had to make going from employee, in this case a school teacher, but going from employee to business owner? Wow. Well, as you know, I've dived into mindset study pretty deeply over the last several years, and I now understand the immense weight of what mindset does and the importance of mindset in how it affects everything that we do. I didn't understand it at the time. In 2010, 2011, when I first got my business off the ground, dude, I was just trying to survive. I was just trying to figure out how to pay the bills, keep the mortgage paid, keep the kids in school. They were in private school at the time, and just take care of the bills. So from a mindset standpoint, it really wasn't a lot different than being an employee. I guess the real difference was that as an employee, I had what I thought was a guaranteed paycheck. But as my story illustrates, it wasn't. I mean, my paycheck got pulled out from under me like that. I assumed it was guaranteed, but it really wasn't. And that's the lie that entrepreneurship and being an employee, there's the lie about being an employee, W-2 employee is so much safer than being an entrepreneur. And it isn't. Because people like me and millions of people like me all over the country are fired, let go, downsized, whatever it is, at the drop of a hat. And you're not in control of that. At least as an entrepreneur, I was in control of that. So I think the biggest mindset shift for me, moving from school teacher, corporate, even though it's not really corporate, but an employee, to being an entrepreneur, was having to understand that I am in control of my destiny, that I am in control of my income. I am in control of the activity that leads to what I'm going to make. And I think that for entrepreneurs, we have to understand that. We've got to understand that if you don't do it, you won't get paid. Now that's obviously because I teach, own it, don't run it, like my t-shirt says, and I run the Exeter Club Mastermind. I wrote the book Exit Without Exiting. I'm not advocating that entrepreneurs stay in the place where you do it and you get paid. I think you need to grow a business where the business does it and you get paid. But entrepreneurs' mindset has to understand that at the beginning, it's all on you. If you don't get it done, you don't get paid. Well, you've sat across from 299 guests on this show. What's the biggest pattern that you've noticed in successful people? What's cool about interviewing so many people on this podcast, The Root of All Success, and now I've got another podcast I'm doing called Chisel and Compass with my good friend Dr. Justin Mosley. We're not doing interviews, but it's cool to he and I to kind of share. But in this particular show, which is what you're asking about, in The Root of All Success, interviewing that many people, the thing that I've noticed probably more than anything is that there isn't a pattern. that they are wildly different. Now, there are similarities, but everybody has chased this differently. I interviewed an attorney recently who's very wildly successful, very successful guy, has firm all across the nation. And he espoused in his show, in his episode, because I asked the questions and he just answered them, a totally different rhetoric than what I would teach my clients about the approach to entrepreneurship. But that works for him, and he does well. Now, I would, given an unguarded moment, I would challenge him a little bit on that and how healthy that is. But nevertheless. And then I've interviewed people, like I interviewed Dr. Sasha Becker, who was not an entrepreneur, who I can't remember what episode number that was, but in that episode, as a professor and a researcher, he clearly demonstrated the over-reliance on the CEO or the owner of the business and how that's detrimental to the company, because he studied when the CEOs and the entrepreneur dies, what happens to the business. And there was a permanent decline in revenue and profitability. And that indicates that it's an over-reliance on the entrepreneur. So I guess the pattern I saw is that there isn't one. There isn't a pattern. Everybody's approaching this differently. But I would say that from a mindset standpoint, that there are similarities in the mindset, but even that is very different. And I think that's probably more surprising than anything I would have imagined when I undertook this podcast to begin with.
What's one episode that changed you the most as a host or as a man?
Obviously I had these questions ahead of time, so I had some time to think about this one. And I thought long and hard about this, and really episode 1. And it wasn't because of the guest. And Andrew Kilpatrick was my guest, and I'll forever be grateful to him for being my guinea pig. He knew he was episode 1. He was a good friend. Well, we haven't talked in a long time, but he's a good guy, a good friend of mine. So the episode that changed me most was that one, and not because of him. And it's certainly no disrespect to him. But what I mean by that is that just starting this project, that's changed. That changed everything. I mean, doing 300 now episodes of this podcast, and let's be honest, I've recorded more than that because some I didn't release and some are yet to be released. But that changed me. Doing this show changed me. So I would encourage listeners, if you're thinking about doing a podcast, do it, but do it well and stick to it. Don't give up. I was talking with a guy at the airport recently that I know, and he had over 300 podcasts, and he's on hiatus right now, and he didn't seem really committed to getting back to it, and that's his call. But to do 300 episodes is a big deal, because most people, I think it's 90% of podcasters don't make it past episode 10. So to make it to 300 is substantial. But that episode 1 changed me, because I knew I'm going to do this. I'm going to stick to this. I'm going to do it. And here we are, almost, well, now we're 300 episodes in. It's pretty cool.
Well, if you could go back to episode 1 and tell yourself something before you hit record, what would you say to yourself?
That's an interesting question. What would I say to myself? Well, I would kind of set this up though. My daughter, Kylie, was with me that day. I didn't have an apprentice. I didn't even have an assistant when I started recording. So, but I needed somebody to come help me set up the cameras and lights and run everything. And she was kind enough to come do that with me that day. And it was an honor to have her with me. And I love her very much. I'm so glad that she was there. But that day, I think if I'd have said to myself, I think what I said to myself before I started recording, I'd said something like, don't take yourself so seriously. I was on that first podcast episode, man, I just needed everything to be, and it was a live episode. I'm doing most of my stuff. I'm doing, recording virtually, like I'm doing this one, but a lot of them, I think 62, I did 62 episodes. Almost all of them were live and in person at the Standard Club in Nashville. And I wanted them all to be perfect. And I think my goal to be perfect in them was good, in that it allowed me to, I guess it just pushed me to make them higher quality. But I think I took myself a little too seriously early on. There can be some mistakes, and there can be some hot mic moments, or the mic not working right or something. And I took myself a little too seriously. But on a more lighter, or maybe even a more serious point, I would say to myself, this is going to be really good. You're really going to enjoy this. And I've really, really enjoyed it for reasons that I didn't anticipate. Well, the podcast has certainly evolved quite a bit from episode 1 to 100 and now to 300. So what are the biggest changes that you've made to the show, and then what are you deliberately going to keep the same throughout?
Yeah, well, that's true. Like I said a minute ago, we've done, I did the first, I think it was the first 62. Most of the first 62 episodes were recorded live and in person at the Standard Club. And I was looking at the list before we went live today, and Alfonso Harvey, he's a good friend of mine, member at the Standard Club in Nashville. I think he was my last in-person guest at the Standard Club. And I started out recording in the Matador room upstairs, and then we moved to the office, did a few episodes in the office, and then we went to what was used to be called the Rhino room and recorded a bunch there. And I think he was the last guest there. And then I had a guest, Jeff Lopes out of Canada. And Jeff was the one who encouraged me to go start doing more or start doing virtual, because I kind of refused to do virtual like this. And he said, man, you need to do it. You'll get more guests. You'll be able to record more shows. So I started recording virtually, and I started on Zoom, and Zoom is absolutely terrible for podcast recording. So I would say that if that's the only tool you've got, you'd better do that than anything else. But it doesn't allow, there's a lot of things Zoom doesn't allow you to do that I now know you need as a podcaster, like splitting out the guest from the host, the audio from the video. You don't want the name on the bottom of the screen so that you can edit that in and out. There's a lot of things that Zoom has limitations, which ultimately I ended up moving to Riverside. And that's been a great platform for me to record virtually for most of my virtual episodes. This one, I'm not recording with Riverside. We're actually just recording straight into the computer, and then we're editing it after the fact. But I think those things just technically has changed. But last year in 2024, I started going back to recording a lot of in-person shows, and I love the in-person stuff. I love it a lot. And so we're doing, I think 9 times this year, we're doing in-person all day recordings where I record 3 or 4 in-person shows. Those are so much more fun. The guests, I'm finding the guests will fly in. I just have to say, hey, you want to come to Nashville? I'm like, yes, I'll get on a plane. I'm not paying for them to come in. I don't pay for their hotel. Now I do take them to dinner usually if I can, and show appreciation for them coming to Nashville. But the guests coming in have been great. I really want a studio. I want a studio, and I don't have one. Like, I've got this makeshift studio at my home office, but I really want a permanent studio set up with cameras, lights, all that. And I know, Jason, you're using the new microphones. We just bought all the new stuff that we're using for our next in-person recording coming up in a couple of weeks. We got new podcast mics, stands. We got some new lights. We got new chords, and we're going to record it differently with some software. So we are making some changes now. But you asked what else has remained the same. Well, I'm going to tell you something. My sign off on every single show is I'm the real Jason Duncan and Jesus is King. That's how I do every sign off. And that was not planned. I remember sitting across from Andrew Kilpatrick on episode 1, and I had not thought about how I was going to sign off the show. And I remember, honestly, it may be the Mandela effect. Maybe I didn't say it on that show, but I remember saying it on that show. As I said, just like I did, I'm the real Jason Duncan, and I pointed at the camera and said, Jesus is King. Because I follow Jesus, and I just wanted to kind of give an homage to my Lord and Savior at the end of that episode. And I've done that every episode since, and I will continue to do that for as long as I'm podcasting.
Has hosting this show made you more successful or just more self-aware?
That's interesting. I would say both. I think it's made me more self-aware because I have to listen to myself and watch myself. I don't watch every episode, and I don't listen to every episode. I think probably maybe a quarter of the episodes I'll go back and listen to. Most I don't. My team obviously goes through and they listen, they edit, they do all the stuff. But so it has made me more self-aware. I remember listening back to the first. I used to listen to every single episode, and I remember listening back to the first probably 5 to 10 episodes and hating the way that I would. Well, I'm not even going to say it because I don't want to call that out. I don't want to ruin the experience for the listener who goes back and listens to that. There were a few idiosyncrasies, things that I would do in the show, my reactions and things that I hated. And I said, I have to stop doing that. So I started being more self-aware about what I'm doing in a show and what I'm doing in real life in conversations. So that was something I noticed. And then about making me more successful, yeah, it's made me more successful. I think it's led me to, it's increased my network. I mean, now I've 300 plus entrepreneurs that I've met that I wouldn't have met otherwise. I've gotten to meet some amazingly successful people, and it's opened the doors to be able to do things, go places, and collaborate with people that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And really, that's, even though I didn't know what my purpose in starting this episode or this podcast at the beginning, I didn't really know what that was to begin with. I now look at this as like the purpose of this podcast isn't necessarily to get millions of listeners and downloads. It's really to increase my network and to be able to talk to more people and to connect with more people. Now, I want to create high quality episodes. I want to create a great show that people want to listen to on a regular basis. But what's cool is that it's allowed me to connect with people in a way that I would not have been able to connect with otherwise.
All right, let's talk about the Exeter Club. I know you started the Exeter Club in 2021 because most people think that exit means selling your business, walking away. So what does exit without exiting really mean to you?
So exit without exiting obviously is the big thing. It's what I talk about all the time. It is my book, which I keep a copy of right here on my desk at all times, just to remind me. I need to write a revision of that and an updated version of that, which I hope to do sometime in the next 18 to 24 months. But when I started this show, that concept didn't exist. Now, it did exist in reality, but it didn't exist in practicality, meaning that I had begun my exit without exiting. And I had maybe even said that phrase, but not in a branding type of way. I hadn't said it. And the book, of course, didn't exist. So for me, what does exit without exiting mean? Exit without exiting means being able to step away from the daily operation and the requirement of being totally 100% involved in your business. Being able to step away without losing control, profit, etc. So, I mean, imagine for a minute that you're running a business, that you own a business, and let's say that business is bringing in $3 million a year in revenue, $5 million, whatever that number is. And as a result, the entrepreneur should be making somewhere 10% of that number, $300,000 to $500,000, maybe $1 million a year, whatever that entrepreneur is able to pull in through profit. But what if you didn't have to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week and still have the business continue to bring in that profit, bring in that revenue, bring in that type of reach, and you still receive that type of pay? That is what exit without exiting provides. And I've been able to successfully do that, and I've also been unsuccessful at it, which is why I want to write a revision of the book. I want to tell the world where I failed on an exit without exiting move, where I made mistakes. Because when I wrote the book, I was in the middle of some of those mistakes, but they had not borne fruit yet. I didn't see how that was going to turn out. Well, now I do. Now I know how that's going to turn out. But now leading the Exeter Club, my mastermind, I've seen it play out in the lives of dozens and dozens of entrepreneurs, and how cool it is to watch their lives change when they truly embrace what I call the exit lifestyle, when they get out of the weeds of daily operations and begin living as if they've sold or exited the business, but they still own it as an asset. That's been cool to watch.
What's the most common trap that entrepreneurs fall into?
Well, that's easy. The most common trap that entrepreneurs fall into is the hero syndrome. And I talked about this in my book originally. I've talked about it with clients. I've talked about it with guests on the show. When I've been guests on other shows, I've talked about it. The hero syndrome is when the entrepreneur puts on the cape and saves the day every single time. And at first, that's not a trap, because you have to. I mean, when you start the business, you start an ice cream shop day one, you got to be there scooping ice cream. You got to be checking people out. You got to be counting out change. You got to make sure there's enough sprinkles. You got to get the ice cream machine working. Like, that's what you do. You're the hero. If something goes wrong, you swoop in, you save the day. But the trap that entrepreneurs fall into is when they stay the hero after maybe a year, maybe 6 months. I mean, every business is different, but there should be a day when you hang the cape up, because the business itself needs to run without you. I mean, there are no billionaire owner operators. The billionaires amongst us are not operating the dailies of their company. They have learned to put the hero cape down because the business got to learn to walk on its own. I mean, think about this. If your business was a child and you loved that business so much, you carried that child everywhere it went. Now, you fed it, you took care of it, you bathed it, you clothed it, but you never set your kid down. And then one day you look up and your business is 10 years old, 15 years old, and you're still carrying it around. That's crazy. And then you decide, okay, well, I need to set this kid down. This, I shouldn't be doing this. And you set it down, and his legs are atrophied. He can't walk on his own. And you're going to have to rehabilitate it to get it to a place where the child can walk on his own. And I know we're mixing metaphors and going back and forth between business and a kid, but I hope you get the point. The point here is the trap that entrepreneurs fall into is they carry the business too long. They act as the hero way too long.
Can you share a story of a member who'd made some massive changes because of your work in the Exeter Club?
Yeah, the Exeter Club has been really cool to watch. When I started the Exeter Club, I was working with a coach at the time, and we were trying to come up with a name for a mastermind and the purpose of the mastermind. And the idea of the Exeter Club came up because Exeter is not technically a word. And so I got to claim that word as my own, as a brand, which was neat. But I didn't really know what we were going to do with the Exeter Club. And it's certainly changed a lot since we established it in the fall of 2021. We had our first meeting in 2022, January 22. And now in the middle of 25, when I'm recording this episode, it's extremely different. Almost, I wouldn't say 180 degrees different, but it is very, very different. And what I'm seeing is that people now, through what we do as a mastermind, they have access to resources and other coaches that they probably, and sometimes almost would never pay for, invest in, or seek out on their own. I had a member just say the other day that we have a mindset coach in the mastermind, and he was telling one of my other coaches, I wasn't present for the conversation, but it got reported back to me at a meeting, that this member said, you know what? I've really enjoyed all the coaches. We have 5 coaches in the program. We have, just to list them, we have a CPA, so who's our finance coach. We have an investment banker who is our investment banking coach to help with valuations, et cetera. We have a legal coach who does M&A work and business structure. We have a wealth management coach. And the wealth management coach helps with personal finances and make sure that the structure is set up to help each member create and maintain generational wealth. And then the fifth one is our mindset coach who helps with the mindset. And so this member was saying to our legal coach, and he was saying, I really enjoy working with all of the coaches in the program, and especially the mindset coach. And I thought, well, that was kind of odd comment to say to another coach. And he said, and here's why. He said, because I probably wouldn't have ever hired a mindset coach. I probably wouldn't have done that on my own. But because that resource is available to me through the Exeter Club, I've been able to talk to him, and it's been extremely helpful. So I think that's just one story. There are others where I sat across the table from one of my clients at dinner. I was taking him to dinner, and he looked at me. We'd been working together for about 6 months, and he said, man, if I hadn't have done this, I would have already quit by now. I would have already quit the business. I'd be delivering pizzas. And I was shocked. I couldn't believe that he said that. And he went on to explain about that he had been to a place where he's working so many hours, he just couldn't do it anymore. And he said the Exeter Club and working with me had really helped him finally unlock what he really wanted to experience as an entrepreneur.
So you teach something called the 5 Freedoms Framework. You talk about energy, money, time, choice, and purpose. If you had to lose 4 of those and only hold on to one, which one would you hold on to and why?
Okay, this is really, really difficult because I believe that they're sequential. I think that energy is where you start because you got to take care of your body, your physical freedoms first, because without that, none of the rest, it doesn't matter how much money you've got. If you're fat and medicated and can't move, or you've got cancer, or you've got a bum leg, or like, energy is really important. And then money is, I think, the second most important in the order that I teach them. because without money, it doesn't matter if you have freedom of time, because now you have no money to do anything with your time, and then choice, like being able to choose, and then finally purpose. Now you're saying I got to pick just one, like if only one. Well, if I was forced to pick one in my current state, I would say money. I would want money. And the reason I would say that is that I am relatively healthy and I'm already in good shape. So I feel like I got the freedom of energy already picked. So I'm kind of cheating. I'm kind of cheating on the question, because money really allows you and unlocks you the ability to do all the rest. If I had to choose, that's what I'd choose.
Which of those freedoms was the hardest for you to get right?
Well, if we're being honest, it's money. I think I have made a lot of mistakes with money. Even in this journey, building the Exeter Club, running this podcast, I have made a lot of mistakes with money. If I had to add it up, I think in terms of bad investments and poor choices in spending money, it's a few $100,000 that I don't have anymore, that I would have had I not made those decisions and made those mistakes. I wasn't taught about money growing up in a way that was helpful. I didn't learn about money in high school, didn't learn about money in college. I mean, I guess the most money education I got was in my early 20s when I started listening to Dave Ramsey's show and reading his books. And as an entrepreneur, I now realize that while a lot of what he teaches is true and right, it's the audience he's aiming at isn't your average entrepreneur. I know he would disagree with that, but that's my position on it. So I really didn't have good money financial literacy. So it's only been over the last 4 or 5 years that I've actually come into what I consider financial literacy. And but that's been the hardest one of these freedoms to get right, and I'm still struggling with it today to a degree. I don't have complete freedom over my money. I don't. I'm working on it, but I don't, and I'm hoping that we'll get there sometime really soon.
Why do so many entrepreneurs chase money first and then still end up being stuck then?
Wow. Well, that's kind of calling me out because I picked money as the thing. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs chase money because of what they see on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and they think that the Lambos and the private jets and the yachts and the fancy watches and it's all posturing. It's all posturing. And I think in the pursuit of money in that context, I think you get that wrong, and there's a lot of I don't know how to word it. But there's a lot of punishment that you'll go through. So for me, in chasing money, it isn't necessarily to have the fancy watches, and I got a Fitbit. I wear a Fitbit most of the time. It isn't the fancy watches. It isn't the fancy cars, although I do love cars. And I just bought a Porsche not too long ago, a Macan, and it's my favorite car I've ever driven. I've had other fancy cars. I like motorcycles. I do love those nice things. And it's not about chasing yachts and Lamborghinis and private jets. Would I want all that stuff? I guess maybe. But my pursuit of money is because I want the freedom of it. I don't want to ever have to ask money permission to do anything. That's what I want, in freedom of money. And I'm not there yet. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs chase money the wrong way, and they end up paying the price for that later.
I know you don't always hear and get feedback from your listeners, but when you do, how does that make you feel that somebody's really listening out there?
What's interesting about this show is I don't get a lot of feedback from listeners, and that's okay. Now, would I prefer it? Sure, I'd prefer people to respond and post. And I'm about to move my podcast host, like I'm hosting it right now on my website at therealjasonduncan.com/podcast or therootofallsuccess.com. But I'm about to move it to a new platform. We haven't totally made that decision, but by the time this comes out, it may have done that. But it will allow for a lot more interaction, and we can create a community, and that's what I'm hoping we can do. But occasionally I do get people reach out and say, man, I listened to your podcast, and that episode with so-and-so was really, really good. I've run into people in public before that, I meet them and then we get to talk and they're like, oh yeah, I listen to your podcast. That's really cool. because I don't really have an aspiration or goal to be famous, but it's pretty cool when that does happen.
Well, even without constant feedback, what makes you believe that this podcast still matters to the right people?
Well, I think it still matters because I'm the person I'm doing it for mainly. Like, and I don't mean that in a selfish way or narcissistic, like we talked about at the top. We were joking about that, but I think that I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this to give me the edge to interview successful people and learn about success and expand my network. I'm not necessarily doing this for listens and downloads and views, although those things are great and I want those things, but that's not why I do this. So I think even without the feedback, this podcast still matters because I'm having really important and deep conversations with people that are cool, people that are successful, and I'm learning a ton. And I think that they do too through the process. And I have had I probably have more feedback from guests than I have from anybody else because the guests say, man, you ask questions I hadn't thought about. I've never really thought about that before. And it really gave them clarity and it was a breakthrough moment for them. So I'm grateful for that.
All right. So as you know, in our show, we always have, there's 4 signature questions. And I'm going to ask you those 4 signature questions now. So what is your one key that has unlocked success more for you than anything else?
I think clarity is the one key to success. I think if I look back in my life and I look at the times where things didn't go right and they didn't go the way I wanted them to go, it's because I lacked clarity. Is because I was chasing something or chasing multiple things without being really clear on what I was trying to get. And then conversely, when I've been laser focused and had true clarity on what I'm trying to get, that's when it usually happens.
How do you personally define the word success?
Okay, this is it. This is the signature question. This is the question I ask in every episode. Now, I believe that success is technically getting what you aim at. Like whatever you want, when you get that's success. That's a dictionary definition. But I think that if I look back at how people have answered that question 300 plus times on this show, I would say that I'd have to agree that success is, of course, defined differently by every person. But I would think that success is when you have freedom over those 5 things. Freedom over your energy, money, time, choice, and purpose. And when you have freedom over those things, I think you are wildly successful beyond imagination. And it doesn't matter what anybody could say, because freedom of money doesn't mean having billions or even hundreds of millions of dollars, because not everybody needs that much money. And freedom of time is really important because we all get 24 hours. And are you able to choose how you do that? Freedom of choice is important because if you can actually choose what you do with your time and your money, then you're in control. And then when you get to exercise your purpose, man, it doesn't get any better than that. That's true success.
Well, based on that definition, which I obviously agree with, do you consider yourself successful?
Well, I think based on that definition, I would say no. But am I successful? Yeah, I'm successful in aspects of my life. I think I have a very successful marriage. I think my wife and I, we've been married 30 years and we're each other's best friends, and we've known each other since we were teenagers, and I'm successful there. I think I've got 2 great kids. I think I'm a successful dad. There were things I wished I'd have done different. I got great parents. I think I'm a successful son. And I've had a lot of success in business, and I've had a lot of failures in business. I think, but by my definition of success, as I just gave, I would say, no, I'm not there yet, because I still have to ask money permission, and I still don't have 100% freedom over my time, although I have more freedom over time than I do money. And choice, I have freedom over choice to a degree, but then I'm stuck. I got to make some things. So no, not yet, but yes, if that's fair.
Your best piece of advice for entrepreneurs who are still trying to build freedom into their life and into their business?
Well, the best piece of advice I could give you as an entrepreneur, if you're trying to build freedom in your business, is understand that the business should be looked at as an asset. It should not be looked at as a job. It is not a thing you should go do. It should be seen as an asset. What is an asset? An asset is something that you control that pays you money, but doesn't necessarily require you to do things. That's an asset. Like if you own stock, or if you own gold, or you own real estate, I mean, those things can appreciate and provide you income without you having to do anything. That's what a business should be seen. And that is the number one piece of advice I've given entrepreneurs. You have to look at your business as an asset, not as a job.
Okay, now I want to ask you our rapid fire questions. I got 4 of these. First question, favorite guest you've interviewed on the show so far?
That is a question that I've been asked that many times before. I don't have a favorite guest that I've interviewed. If I had to be following the narcissistic play that we're doing here, it'd be me, but that's not true. That's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke there. But I've had so many, and I've mentioned them already on this show, but they've not all been good. As a matter of fact, I interviewed one person, and when we finished, I made the decision I'm not airing that episode. It was a terrible interview. That's only happened once in 300 tries. But I've had great guests, so I don't really have a favorite. I'm sorry.
Biggest lesson you've learned the hard way?
Well, for those that have listened to this podcast and follow my blog and my newsletter, you'll know that at the end of 23 and early 24, I went through a terrible loss of a business, and there were 10 specific lessons that I revealed during that season of life that I learned. And I would probably defer to go check out the blog. If you go to therealjasonduncan.com/blog and just go back and look at, I think January, February of 2024, if you just look for the dates, there's 10 things. I write 10 different blog posts about the 10 things I learned the hard way. But overall, like if I had to sum that up, I would say that handling money, I've learned the hard way, and also business partnerships, I've learned the hard way. I've had 2 terrible failures in business partnerships that were just gut wrenching, and I would never want to go through that again. But I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, and I will reiterate, go to therealjasonduncan.com/blog and just do a date search and look for January and February 24 and just look for the blog posts. And because I do go into those mistakes and the lessons that learned. So it's good. All right, let's get to the third question. What's one thing you do differently in business than most people?
You know, I don't know, honestly. I think that what I do in business that's probably different than most people is I actually try to look at my employees and clients as valuable. Well, let's look at employees. I look at my employees as more valuable than my clients, because without them, I couldn't serve my clients. So my assistant, my apprentice, my editors, the people that work on my team, to me, they're more valuable than clients who are paying me a lot of money, because without my team, I couldn't serve my clients. But my clients are also valuable too, and I love them, and I'm very appreciative of them. And I've got people on my team like my coaches. I see them as rock stars in this whole organization. So I think from a business standpoint, I don't look at the people I work with and the clients I serve as means to an end. I look at them as maybe not necessarily family, because I don't want to get too woo-woo on that, but I think I do look at them as family. We're our team, and I really am concerned about their well-being.
So what's something that most people misunderstand about you?
I don't know. Again, I knew these questions ahead of time, and I've thought about this. I don't know what is it that people misunderstand me. I read a book a long time ago. Ken Vogus wrote the book. I think it was him. Understanding how others misunderstand you, and it was based on the DISC assessment, and it was a really interesting book. But even thinking back to that, I don't know what people misunderstand about me. I try to be honest and authentic, and I'm trying to do things the right way. I'm trying to honor my King and Jesus, and I don't know. I don't know what other people might misunderstand about me. So I don't know. If you think something is wrong, just send me a DM. Let's talk about it.
Well, hey, before we wrap up today's show, I want to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Dub. Dub has been with me the longest. They've been a title sponsor of this podcast for a long time. Ruben and Darius and the guys over there at Dub are phenomenal. And if you've ever seen me in an email video, you've seen Dub. This is how I contact prospects. This is how I talk to my clients. This is how I follow up with meetings. It's a seamless way to do it with Dub. And I know there's other screen recording softwares out there that have become ubiquitous and everybody knows it, but Dub does all of that and more. They make it ridiculously easy to personalize your communication. And we're very grateful to have them as our title sponsor of The Root of All Success. We've got a free, you get actually half off your first two months, plus you get a free trial if you go to therealjasonduncan.com/dub. That's therealjasonduncan.com/dub, and that's spelled DUBB. Go check them out. Make sure you tell them that The Real Jason Duncan sent you from The Root of All Success, and I promise you will love Dub, and you'll never send emails the same again. All right, now it's that time of the show where, it's where I am going to do my JD's public service rant. This is the part of the show where I call out something that shouldn't have to be said, but clearly it does. So if you are guilty of the thing I'm about to talk about, well, consider yourself put on notice. All right, today's rant is about loud gum chewers. And listen, gum is great. I chew gum 100% of the time when I'm awake. I almost always have it in my mouth. And I'm a big extra peppermint fan, and I've got this right here on my desk today. This is what I love gum. But listen, gum is good, but for the love of all that is decent, chew your gum with your mouth closed. If you sound like a cow chewing cud, you're not just annoying, you're ruining somebody's day. Nobody wants to be front row to your chewing symphony. So do us all a favor. Chew like a human. Keep your mouth closed. Don't chew like an animal. Well, that's it for today's JD's public service rant. If you've got one you'd like me to cover, just send me an email and let me know. And remember, don't be that guy. So here we are. We're 300 episodes into The Root of All Success, and you're listening, and I am so grateful that you're here. So let me ask you, Jason, what's next for The Root of All Success?
Well, I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate me doing this. I don't know how to say this since I'm interviewing myself, but I got to thinking about this episode, and I wanted to make 300 special. I wanted to make it meaningful. I wanted to make it really, really good, and I wanted to make it mean something, not just be another episode. So what's next is we're going to continue to record episodes. I'm not giving up on this. This is going to go. I'm going to hit 1,000 episodes. I know. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep interviewing great people. And if anybody listening, if you have a great story of success and you're an entertainer, an athlete, a leader, an entrepreneur, reach out, go to therootofallsuccess.com. Let's talk. I want to get you on the show, but I really, really want to see this show continue to grow in its impact and how we attract listeners and attract guests at a high level. I want to, I haven't done it yet. I got to get more sponsors, but thanks to the sponsors you mentioned already, but I want to set up my own studio where it's permanent, where I've got the 2 chairs, the microphones, the lights, and everything. And we come in and sit down and we can rap for an hour and have a great episode. So that's probably the biggest thing I'm looking forward to in the next 200 to 300 episodes.
Well, Jason, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for doing the show. And this is kind of weird. I get interviewing myself is a little weird, but thank you, listener, for sitting through this, for watching it. If you didn't watch it, that's kind of it's kind of a cool thing to watch it on YouTube. My editors are doing a fantastic job of moving the cameras back and forth and making it look like 2 different people interviewing, even though it's just me and 2 different camera angles. But this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you go do that. And make sure you tune in next time as we go to episode 301, which I've already recorded, by the way, and I know it's good. It's an awesome episode. I want you to listen to that as I interview successful people about their journeys to success. But again, thank you from the bottom of my heart to you as a listener. Thanks to Dub for being our sponsor, and I'm so grateful that you're on this journey. Until next time, as always, I am the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Attention business owners. Attention business owners. Feeling burnout from running your business? Uncertain if you're nearing burnout? Take our free 10-question business burnout test at businessburnouttest.com to discover where you stand. With just 10 quick questions, you'll learn how to immediately begin making changes to regain freedom and success. cut your daily operations time in half, improve your quality of life, and prepare your business for your future exit without losing revenue or profit. Visit businessburnouttest.com now and take the test. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.